Welcome, everybody. It is fantastic to have you join us today. This is really a very special opportunity for us to look at and dig down a little bit deeper into what we've been doing with our Keystone Trust Talks this year. So we've started off with our first presentation around diversity and inclusivity. And then the second presentation we did was around neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And this one, I think, is probably the last great taboo that we need to be thinking about. And look, I'm doing this probably quite selfishly because we have students who are going to be entering into the workforce who are transgender, who do have a different way of perceiving themselves. And we want to ensure that the industry who is going to embrace these young people can actually do that and feel comfortable in themselves and being able to support our students. But also we thought that this was an opportunity for us to have in terms of you, our sponsors, because some of you may be facing this as well. And there's not an awful lot of information out there. So we've been very, very fortunate to have been introduced to Lexi Matheson here, who is with AUT. And we've met with Lexi and had a fantastic conversation, just hearing her story and what is meant for her to be transgender. And then to also have with her the opportunity to learn. And this is what this is about. This is the start of a dialogue. And Lexi has got an enormous number of slides, but a lot of them are informational slides. And we may be able to move through those quite quickly, but there is so much rich information and data in here. We would love to take your questions, so please put them in the Q&A and we will take those at the end of the session. So I would like to hand over to Lexi because I'd like this time to be spent for her to be able to share her knowledge with you. Thank you. Over to you.
Kia ora tātou, ngā mihi nui ki a koutou katoa, ko manga kikia te maunga, ko Waitamata te awa, ko Otatahi ahau, ko Matheson toko whānau, ko Whakawahine toko Takatapui whānau, ko Lexi Matheson toko ingoa. Welcome and thank you for coming. Thank you so much for coming. My pepeha, I'm not Māori. I'm married to a Māori woman, but that doesn't rub off that much. So these are places and areas that I relate to, but that I don't whakapapa to. So Mangakirkia is probably most commonly known as One Tree Hill, and I spend an awful lot of time down there with my son, who is an archer. The archery range is down there, and I love that mountain. Waitamata is my awa, that's the sea around where we are on the isthmus. It's very special to us. Otatahi is my home. Christchurch is my home. My family name is Matheson. We are Irish and Scottish and all sorts of places if you look at my DNA. And whakawahine means traveling towards womanhood. So that's my transgender identity, and takatapui is the Māori term for anybody who lives in a relationship with others who are not of the same gender that they're on. So that's a little bit about me. A little bit of a bio there, largely because I'm doing another event this weekend, which is, as Amanda has amusingly said, it's odd to be doing a prime ministerial terrorism conference and having me talk at it is sort of a bit overwhelming. So I wrote this for that anyway. I've had 5 careers in the military for 8 years. A lot of transgender people, transgender women, spend a lot of their life trying to prove what men they are because that's what society wants of us, and we fail dismally. My 8 years in the army was largely to do with that, and education, the performing arts, local government in Christchurch, and in academia, which is where I've been for the last 25 years. So currently I'm a senior lecturer at AUT. My areas, my disciplines are event management and leadership. I'm an international athlete, surprisingly. It surprises me every time I think about this as well. For 7 years, I have been a New Zealand representative at karate, because karate is one of those sports, and most sports, and we'll talk about sport later, is one of those sports that is divided up by age and by weight and by strength. So because I'm over 65, I get to compete in the over 65 division with other women who are over 65, and we have a tremendously good time, even if the karate's not that great. And I manage from time to time the New Zealand archery team as well. I'm an activist in the human rights area. I work a lot for my community. I mean, 5 times I've been nominated for New Zealander of the Year, which is always, every time that happens, I go, where did that come from? But in 2021, I was the runner-up for Senior New Zealander of the Year, and they had to produce Dame Margaret Sparrow to beat me. What a wonderful woman she is. I sat at the table with her and thought, well, one thing I don't have to worry about is whether I'm going to win this, because she is just the most fantastic person. And ONZM in 2016. So I'm married to my wife, Kushla, who identifies as a lesbian woman, and we are proud parents of a 20-year-old son, Finn, who's a double international sports person as well. The good thing about Finn, and he's really proud about this, is that both of his parents, both of the women who are his parents, are his biological parents. Try and get your head around that for a wee moment or two. Okay, a whole lot of photographs here that you don't have to look at. Karate photos there, New Zealander of the Year photos. That's my lad down there in the bottom left-hand corner. You wouldn't see him like that today because he's got a big beard today. A local hero award that from the New Zealander of the Year there, and that's my son in Shanghai competing at the World Cup there. This is a little rundown of me, and there's another one later on as well. The things that I do: politics, local government. That's the Rainbow Communities Advisory Panel for Auckland Council. Be interesting to see if our new mayor continues with the advisory panels. He doesn't seem to need much advice. He's got plenty to say already, but we'll wait and see how that works. And I hope he does, because those advisory panels are really, really useful. I spend a lot of time as the chair of Pride, or co-chair, with Cassie Roma, who you can see there in the photo up in the top right-hand side, who you've most recently seen on Celebrity Treasure Island. And there's a whole lot of photos along the bottom. There's me a very long time ago in a cowboy outfit that my mum made me when I was at Teachers College, the one in the middle, and when I was about 22 in the one that just says long ago. Some of the things that I get involved with, a lot of lecturing, a lot of teaching, a lot of work in the leadership space, in the politics space. The photo of me with Grant Robertson there was taken at a Pride event, but I've known Grant for a long, long time. So advocacy, you spend a lot of time with cameras in your face when you're an advocate, but all the time we need to have support groups. And there's an international support group for transgender people called To Write Love on Her Arms. We have a terrible history of self-harm, and To Write Love on Her Arms really just draws our attention to the fact that if we get a pen and we write on our arm, it's a lot better than getting out a craft knife or a scalpel and doing damage like that too. Wonderful international organization called Fight Like a Girl, similar sort of thing. The top there is a top photo on the left there is Kushla's and my wedding. I'm in the middle, the bloke in the middle there, next to the beautiful woman. That's my queer whānau who were at the wedding. And people keep writing things about you if you're an activist. And that's a book by Margie Thompson called Womankind, and she chose to write a chapter on me, which is, I was really honored to have that. And that's my son down the bottom. The night that he became a world archery championship, the international indoor field archery champion, just a couple of years ago. So I'm very proud of him. He's a good lad. I spent a lot of years working in the theatre. There are a lot of photographs of me in these male garb, but all that time, I knew who I was. And of course, Hamlet, everybody has a Hamlet in them, apparently. This is the World Karate Championships this year. That's my silver medal. Don't think that that's a fantastic achievement. People say it is a fantastic achievement, and I suppose it is, but There were only 2 in my division, so getting second in that sense wasn't an extraordinary karate achievement, but it was wonderful to be able to compete with Sensei Lillian Catton from South Africa. And that's a photo of me in the few moments that I actually remained standing. And thank you particularly for coming today and engaging with this conversation. Yours is an industry that I don't know, but I look forward to finding more out about that. Some of the things about us as people. The black dog of depression is something that most of us experience. There is a lot of thought and a lot of material you will hear in the hate speech about us that suggests we suffer from mental illness. The data doesn't tell us that. The data says that mental illness in the transgender community is as a result of the way we are treated by society. Now that sounds like sort of victim sort of stuff, but in fact it's true. I'm a reasonably tough cookie, but the black dog bites me from time to time as well, and a reminder about self-harm. We have the highest suicide rate amongst any identifiable group of people in our society. Wonderful to see that the suicide rates in New Zealand have dropped for the 3rd year in a row. That's really empowering. And I have yet to see any data about my community, but there are some fairly scary figures later on in this PowerPoint, which is here for you. It's a big, long PowerPoint. I don't expect that we'll get through all of it today. It was never the intention. The intention was that you will have something to take away that you can put in a folder. You know, Amanda said that there are 65 people signed up for this today. I don't imagine there are 65 people with a transgender person applying for work in your industry. It would be lovely to think that was the case, but I doubt that it is. But what I imagine this PowerPoint could do, it can be tucked away in a folder somewhere on your desktop. And should the situation arise where you need to look at this information, it's there available for you. And there are a lot of links in the PowerPoint as well. 2 times during the year that we are able to be very visible. One is on Transgender Day of Visibility, which is the 31st of March every year, where we do the things that we need to do to become more visible in our communities, because on the other side is Transgender Day of Remembrance, which is the day every year where we commemorate the people who have been killed from our community because of hate crimes. And the illustration over there on the right is of the 26 trans women who were killed in court-determined hate crimes. These are not just people who died. These are people who, when their court cases came through, the court determined that they were killed because of hate crimes in Philadelphia. That's in Philadelphia alone. Most of them were trans women of color. And that's just to remind us that being transgender is not necessarily a safe place to be, especially if you try to live your life in very close proximity to the mainstream with partying and so on. So you can explore both of those. If you wish, you can friend me on Facebook and you'll see these things come up every year. There's also, as you can see there, a tattoo that is popular in my community. I have it. Is the semicolon there. My story isn't over yet. It says that tattoo, the semicolon says, I am a survivor of suicide attempts. So it's sort of like saying, there it is, that's me. And we do a lot of that in the transgender community. We do a lot of that's me. So there's the semicolon. That's not the same, that's not mine, but I really like that. Like I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. I tried to kill myself, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. So watch out for that. When you're talking to transgender people, we tend to have ink, we daub ourselves with ink. So have a look for that, because that's what it will tell you. Some of the memes that I really like, trans women are women. Often we're told we're not. It's very damaging to be told that you're not what you know you are. More about that later on. Trans rights are human rights, another tagline that's very, very popular in my community. And inclusion. This is something that I've had sort of driven into me this year by Sport New Zealand, that inclusion means everyone. Sport New Zealand have just created a set of protocols for community sport, for transgender involvement in community sport, and they've been ruthless about that. This has nothing to do with international sport. This is just your local rugby club, your local netball club, and so on. That inclusion means everybody. It doesn't mean inclusion of everybody except these particular people we don't like. And there's this one too about equality. The picture on the left is equal treatment. Every one of those people have got equal treatment, but the little guy in the purple shirt is not seeing much. The next one is equitable treatment. Different words, different meanings. So we've got equitable treatment there. Everybody except the guy on the left is standing on a box. The little guy can now see he's standing on 2 boxes, but the removal of systemic barriers to inclusion and equity is there on the right, where everybody has a good view and they don't have to do anything to themselves to change that. So equity is a really important word in our community. It should be a really important word in everybody's community, I think. So thanks for being here today. I've no idea what your journey is, where you're up to on it. But it's no coincidence that we've all ended up here today, now, in this moment. Each of us made the decision consciously, and as single steps go, this one feels really good. I don't know you. You don't really know me. You're going to know far more about me in the next half hour than you probably want to. But this is what we've done. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Lao Tzu said that an awful long time ago. So I'm here because Amanda's made an invitation and to me, and so here we all are. And I think the work that the Keystone Trust does is magnificent. I really do think, and I'm so glad that you're involved with it, because it shows tremendous perspicacity on your part. So I identify as a transgender woman. My pronouns are she and her. More about pronouns later on. So that your trust wants your industry to be open, willing, and able to accommodate everyone who comes through, all students, however they might identify, which is one of the reasons she subsequently created these excellent Keystone Talks. And of course, there's 2 on YouTube, and if you haven't had a listen to them, do so. That's a little bit about the trust. You know more about that than I do, but what a great kaupapa that is. So it's not a bad thing to be challenged by things that we don't understand. And that's possibly why you're here going, oh, well, I'll go and have a look at that, because that's not an area where your life has necessarily crossed over with people like me. And that's okay. That's it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a thing. But one of the things that I do a lot is I sit in a chair at Cornwall Park and I watch my son shoot arrows, because he shoots 400 arrows a day, every day. And I go down there and watch him compete in tournaments and so on. He's sitting on the cusp of Olympic selection. So he trains a lot, and I like to be there with him because it's an odd family. He's 20, I'm 77, and I don't know how much longer I've got, but I want to be able to spend as much of that time being productive in his world as I possibly can. The reason for saying that is most weekends there are youth tournaments, and I sit there in my chair. My partner always puts an empty chair next to me. It's called the visitor's chair, and people come and sit in it, and we talk about all sorts of things. Older people, we just chew the fat, but quite often, I would say every weekend, there'll be a mum or a dad or a kid come up and say, you're Lexi, aren't you? And I'll say, yes. My daughter has just come out to me as a lesbian, and I don't know what to do. And the answer is quite simple. Well, do you love them? Yes, I do. Well, then treat them just the way you've always treated them. Respect them. Use the pronouns they want you to use. Just be aware that when they come home with a partner, it's more likely to be a girlfriend than it is to be a boyfriend. And get your head around that. And here's my business card. Contact me anytime you want to. That's a deal I have with you now. That's our deal today. That's my contract with you, is that for listening to me for half an hour today, you have access to me forever. any time of the day or night. There's my mobile phone number there as well. That's there in the PowerPoint, so you don't have to look me up. And if I can be of any use to you, do that. This happens to me every weekend. Last weekend there was a tournament, and a woman I've known for many years came up and said, Lexi, can I talk to you? And that's the key to me. Yes, something's coming up. And Tony said, I've just met my nephew, who used to be my niece, and his name is Axel. And so we had a talk about what that means to the family to have a transgender person of 14 years of age come out to them. What does that mean? And at the beginning of the conversation, she couldn't get her head around the pronouns. It was, she, I'm sorry, he. And by the end of that hour conversation, it was fully Axel, it was he. She'd made that transition, and she went away going, I know what to do now. I hadn't told her what to do. She just worked it out for herself. Love them, embrace the pronouns, get your head around the fact that this person is growing up and is a little bit different to perhaps what they were yesterday. But if you love them and they're part of your family, embrace who they've become. And this happens to me every weekend. So check out the videos that have been made by the Trust. They're fantastic. I've watched them a number of times. They're really, really good. So someone, whether you know it or not, someone you know is a transgender person. Well, obviously you know me now, so there you go. We know each other. And I always say, think before you spread hate. About 45% of young transgender people attempt suicide, especially those ones who don't have family support. So, and it happens often with young people from religious families. They come out to their families, and next thing you know, they're living on the street, and then they are seriously at risk. So if you see people spreading hate, have a word with them, say, hey, that's not cool. And perhaps a bit of education. I'm happy to fill one of those gaps as well. Okay, this next, the next slide is the slow learner slide. This is me over the years, from being a baby through to being 55 when I came out. That's me on Kushlas and my wedding day. But you can see this person all the way through there. It was around about this age, around about the age of 8, that I knew who I was, and it was because of this photograph. My parents had a magazine that they used to get called the Australasian Post, and at the back it had little snippets like Sideswipe. And there was this photograph of Christine Jorgensen coming down the steps of a plane, and she'd just come back from Scandinavia, where she had had a sex reassignment surgery. Yeah, that's her. And I saw this and I read that article, age 8, and I thought, that's me. That's me. That's a person who is like me. I am like her. So I did something I've never done before. I stole the magazine and I put it under my mattress, and I kept it for many, many months and years under my mattress. And my parents would be going around going, where's the Aussie Post? Where's that gone? And I would just sit there on the couch and say nothing. So 50 or so years on, it took me a long time to do anything about knowing that I was transgender. There wasn't even a word for it in those days. When I came out, the only word was transsexual, and that's not what I am at all. So 50 or so years, I did nothing about it. Nothing, that is, except drug abuse, alcohol abuse, infidelity with men and women, secret cross-dressing, all of these things, which if you read the literature, you'll find that most transgender people of my generation did all of those things until they realized who they were and did something about it. Now, I didn't realize who I was. I had a health scare and I went to see a counselor, and I'd never really trusted counselors very much. I went to a counselor to talk about sexual abuse in my childhood, not a family member, just sexual abuse in my childhood. And he said eventually, I think there's something else. So he went away and did a bit of research, came back with some knowledge. I did the same. I came back with some knowledge, and we went, okay, transgender, that's where you are. And at that moment is when I decided that I would transition. And when I transitioned, literally all, and this sounds like some sort of religious proselytizing, but it's not, it's actually true. all of those issues in my life of drug abuse, personal abuse, all of the self-harming and stuff, literally all went away. And so I know it's possible. So all of that stopped literally the moment I decided to transition. Sadly, I didn't end up looking like Christine Jorgensen or Joe Jorgensen as he had been as a Marine, but I look better than I did then. So that's the whole lot of photos of me. And that last one at the age of 55 is on my wedding day to Kushla. So I was blind and as self-deceiving as old Tiresias in Socrates' plays, in 3,000 years ago, where he talks about, he has the prophet Tiresias there, who got into all sorts of trouble for hitting a snake up on Mount Olympus, and the gods said, okay, as a punishment you can be both male and female. And there are plays about him, and I've played the character of Tiresias in all of those plays, which is interesting. Okay, still taboo subjects? Yes, there are. Probably transgender, gender-related matters is the next taboo subject that we have to address. I doubt that it's something you will go to your dinner parties, talk to people about, but if it comes up, I'd like to hope that you will have some informed opinion, because there's a hell of a lot out there that isn't. We don't have all the answers, but we can help demystify some of these things. Transgender women in sport, which is my area, that's the next battleground that we have to resolve and get rid of all of the non-scientific opinions, which mostly come down to men big and strong, women small and weak, which is about as misogynistic as you could possibly get. So we've got to get around that. We've got to start looking at the science and so on. So I'm lucky to be working in that space and Sport New Zealand as well. Okay, there's pages of resources here for you. If you have a transgender young person who comes to you, or a transgender person who comes to you, because we don't always transition when we're young. I transitioned when I was 55. And a lot of my people of my age group have done that. These are resources which will be useful to you, but more importantly, be useful to those people who come and work for you and with you, or live in your world, who identify as transgender. So there's a whole lot of their online resources. Others, that top one there, Gender Minorities Aotearoa, it's a really good resource. Te Wana down at the bottom, but probably more importantly, Rainbow Youth. Youth up to the age of 27, and they have fantastic resources. Their motto is know who you are, be who you are. And Outline New Zealand is a phone resource that you can access at any time when things are a bit rough, and sometimes they do get a bit rough in our community. So there's each one of those red lines is a hot link. So get hold of those and use those if you wish, and a whole lot more. So there are plenty of places that you can go, and some of them are really refined, specific for a particular purpose. For example, the one at the top there, Families Like Mine's a guide for parents and families of young people who identify as LGBTQI, lesbian, lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual, queer, or questioning, because a lot of people, they have to ask a whole lot of questions before they make any decisions, and that's rightly so. So this 25 years that I've been out and visible, has it been easy? No, but it's much better than what I was before. I've had beatings because of who and what I am, even by cops, which is not uncommon for my community, because particularly our transgender women of colour, many of them rely on sex work to live, and the cops have an odd relationship with that. Not all of them, of course, some of them are fantastic. And our current right-wing politics is getting nastier and nastier. We are attacked constantly by a group of people called TERFs, trans exclusionary radical feminists. There's not much feminist about them, but they attack us. And the main area of attack is you cannot change your sex You are a man and you are responsible for all the violence against women in our community. You're just like everybody else. And of course, they attack us in terms of toilets, what we can use. Why do we use women's toilets? It's so we can go and sexually attack women and children, even though that has never happened. That's what they accuse us of being. So it's really nasty. Death threats, social media. I had death threats every week. They used to really worry me. They don't anymore. The first death threat I had, I really panicked about it because it named my wife and my son, and I thought, oh, this is not something I want. So I did what I think we all do from time to time. I stalked this person, and it turned out that he was living in a trailer park in Kansas, and at that point I stopped worrying about whether he was going to appear at my door and hack my family to pieces. But you do have to be careful. And of course, then there are people like you who are here to listen and to learn and to ask questions. That's our wedding cake. We had we had Bob the Builder, he was there, representing you, of course, Bob the Builder, and my father-in-law is a Sparky, and that's Barbie, of course, on the right. And a lot of the people who were guests at our wedding, and we had a big bunch of people, assumed that I was Bob the Builder and that Kushla was Barbie. In fact, that wasn't true at all. It's the other way around. Kushla's family called her Bob even, because even before she came out as a lesbian, they'd sort of worked it out somehow along the line. So that's our wedding cake. And the good thing about those two toys, which I really loved, was looking forward to keeping, is that they got stolen on our wedding day by two kids who would know who they are, and they would have loved having those toys. Okay, our scenario today, so we don't get off track. You advertise a position and you have a number of applicants. You shortlist, you interview people, all the traditional stuff. This is our scenario, but your one will be different because they're all different. Your preferred applicant appears to be, or says they are, gender diverse, because we don't always say. We're very cautious about who we give that information out to, especially if we want to achieve something like having employment. Employment is a serious issue within my community. So what are your options if you employ this person? Or how do their needs as an employee differ from other more conventional appointments? So what do you need to do, if anything at all? Have you got any support? Well, here on www.employment.gov.nz, there's a whole lot of information there that can help you, which is far more important for you than me rambling on about it now. My own personal experience was I came out whilst working at the University of Auckland, which was a very warm and engaging environment, fantastic employer, and I was on a number of high-level committees, and I was really respected on those committees. People listened to me, and they treated me with respect. And when I came out, they treated me with respect as the woman that I suddenly appeared to them as. They did things like opening doors for me. I don't need people to open doors for me, but what they stopped doing was listening to me. And so I remember sitting in my office and thinking, so that's what it's like to live an authentic life as a cisgender woman. Nobody listens to you. You make the tea. You take the notes. You're the secretary. Nobody takes you seriously. And that's been a battle I've had for 25 years. Please take me seriously. So that's a sort of scenario that we've got. So what is that like for the trans person who's applied for the job? First of all, ask yourself, can I do the job? And if the answer is yes, what do you do next? Well, you do your due diligence, otherwise known as stalking. Your employer's probably doing the same. Go and find out what sort of things are they saying on social media? What is their profile on the internet? And know that they'll be doing the same. So make sure as a transgender person, your profile on the internet and on social media actually reflects who you are, and then apply for the job. Decide how much you wish to disclose. So this is what's happening to you as an employer. People are deciding how much they wish to disclose and how they're going to do that. Ask yourself this again if you get an interview. So you're sitting there in an interview, and chances are transgender people often look different to other people. So what are you feeling in that space? What are they feeling while you're talking to them? Role play that interview for yourself, and hopefully they will have done that. Find someone else who can do that for you. And what special needs do you have in your industry? I don't know. But there's always issues around bathrooms, toilets, the sort of strength that you have if you've been taking estrogen and testosterone blockers. One of the things that people forget in terms of sport is our muscle mass goes away. We're nowhere near as strong after 3 months on testosterone blockers and on estrogen than we were before that. And do your best to present the best you that you possibly can, so that the person, you sitting in this room, will be able to look at this person and go, can I deal with employing this person because I want to? Let's assume they're the best applicant. How are we going to deal with this? How am I going to tell the other people we work with? Well, there are a whole lot of tools that you can use for that. What I did at the University of Auckland, in the main, I handled it okay. I talked to my boss. He was really supportive. We wrote a letter to all the other people who worked in the University of Auckland that I came in touch with, and it simply said, hello, you know me as Lexi, you know me as Lex, which was my name before. From now on, I identify as a woman, and so my clothing will be different, and my pronouns will be different, and all I ask is that if you have any questions, you ask me, and if you can respect the decisions that I've made, I'd be really grateful. Never had any issues whatsoever, apart from people opening doors for me. And that link at the bottom is the same one for them that I've given to you from employment.gov. So you're here. That's step one. It's a big step that you've come today. And education is the key. It's the key to everything. And that's what the trust is about, and giving it a go. And sometimes you have to go, well, I'm going to take a risk here, because it is a risk employing a transgender person. You know, they're not going to firebomb your house or anything like that. Most of us are quite passive people. That's what the estrogen does, and the testosterone blockers takes away a whole lot of anger. One of the things I really liked about that, about who I became when I transitioned, was I lost a whole lot of that anger because of the estrogen and the happiness that I was experiencing. So if you decide to give it a go, the employment situation for you, just use whatever your usual processes are and stick to them. Know the law, abide by the law, and know the Human Rights Act. It's really helpful. The Human Rights Act gives you a whole lot of information. That department is really helpful. And if you want some advice from somebody, phone the department and ask for Tane Polkinghorn. He's a trans man, fantastic young guy. And he's someone I go to often, particularly if I've got young trans men wanting some support and some help. And he's the sort of person you'd like to have a beer with. You know, he's knowledgeable, he's kind, he's supportive, and he's not very big, but I can forgive him for that. So he's someone that you could go and talk to straight away. Some questions that you will need to ask. Is the applicant known to you? How much have they disclosed to you already? Do they already work for you? And do you think there might be issues around toilets, the bloody toilets that we never stop talking about? It's like at home, really. You know, most of us only have one toilet, and our whole house uses it. Everybody, regardless of gender, uses the toilet. And it's no different in a workplace. And if you decide to employ this person, how will you notify the rest of the people in your workforce? How will you inform them? And will you include your new employee in this conversation? And of course, the unspoken question is, what do you do if somebody objects? Well, of course, this will be determined by the relationship you have with that person, and acceptance and understanding is probably the best way around that. What I generally find in situations like that is the person who's got the problem is anxious and fearful about their own status. So often a decent conversation, a cup of coffee, often can clarify that. You can always put those people onto me if you want to. I'm assuming you care about your team, or you wouldn't be here. And the other question is, can they do the job? Can they do the job? Transitioning on the job, how will you manage that if somebody who already works for you decides they're going to transition and they come and talk to you? I transitioned at work when I was 53. Not everyone transitions at the same age, and we often forget this. We talk about young people transitioning and we assume they're doing it at 14 or 15 years of age. But in the older generation, often it takes a long time for us to have the courage to actually come out, even to ourselves, let alone to other people. But when we do, if we're employed and employed by you, that's a challenge that you have to deal with. Not everyone transitions at the same age. So be prepared to have that complex conversation. You know the person, you know them really well. It's not going to, I don't think it's going to be a problem with anybody in this room. So if you're talking to this person, how can I help you? How can I support you? Is an excellent phrase to start with, because they will have gone through every scenario that you can think of. They'll have already gone through it, and they'll have approached it from the point of view anxiety, fear. What's going to happen when I go and tell Jack? Is he going to laugh at me? Is he going to mock me? These are things that we fear. We are anxious about being mocked and being laughed at, having people talk about us behind our backs. What I've found is that the fear is 90% worse than what actually happens. In fact, when you come out to people, even if they're people you know well, most of them don't care. Many of them will have known already. They'll have worked that out. There's nothing more exciting than hearing about a young person going to their parents and saying, "Mum and Dad, I've got this confession to make, I'm gay." The parents go, "Oh, thank God you finally told us." We knew that already. So complex conversations come as a result of that. So let trans people know how you feel. We're not very good at that in New Zealand, and letting people know how we feel. But you tell them where you go. Now, what I'm going to do now, in the full knowledge that there is miles more material here, I'm going to drop this down, and I know that. Oops, we've got chat here as well. What's going on? So everything's disappeared on me here. That's all right. I'll go back to there. I'll say, Amanda, do you want to take over here and run a Q&A? And the knowledge that I can always come back another time and we can continue
Sure.
this conversation if you want. Up to you.
Sure, not a problem. Look, I think this has been quite fascinating. The first thing that stands out to me is the amount of support that actually exists in the community for people to ask advice from, whether you be the person who's transitioning or you are the person who is a support person. That's incredible. I had no idea. This makes me feel a lot more comfortable with some of the conversations that we do have at times. So are there any questions, comments, thoughts, fears, concerns? Because this is perhaps one of those more taboo type conversations. And this is an opportunity for anybody here in this room to ask those questions that you might think are a little bit silly, but actually they're not, because you probably never thought about this before, or if you did, you thought, I don't know who to ask it all. So feel free to put any questions that you might have up there.
What I always tell my students is there's no such thing as a silly question, except the question you don't ask. And
Absolutely.
you know, we're not clairvoyant. We can't work out what you need to know, but it doesn't have to be in front of everyone. You know, you can put it in the chat, or you can send me an email or whatever. But yeah, it's all yours now. I've had my turn.
Well, there's certainly a lot more left in the presentation. I can absolutely vouch for that, because I think there is more information there as well, for everyone to actually be able to share and understand. I'm just going to bring it up for myself so I've got it in front of them.
What about you? Do you have any questions? There's plenty of stuff there to, you know, you're the glue in this, Amanda, you and Noella and your team. You sit in the middle of this, and I think that's a fascinating place to be. I know where I sit in this. I'm available for anybody who wants to talk about it any time. The university is very good. It doesn't mind me taking time out to engage with people. on about anything to do with diversity. So, but is there anything there that you might wish to?
Well, perhaps one of the things to talk about, and I'm sorry, this is a really, you said it before, bloody toilets. I think that is something where a lot of people get very confused and very concerned about. I was working at a school and it was an all-boys school. And what we chose to do was to actually ask the students what they would like when we were redesigning the toilet block. And it was really surprising to us on the senior leadership team that the young men said, we want separate cubicles. We don't want the all-in-one urinals. We're not into that anymore. We believe that for ourselves and for those around us, privacy is and appropriateness is what is important. So it was easy. We just redesigned what we were going to produce. So
this was Auckland Grammar.
Yeah, this is Auckland Grammar School.
Wow,
So
that's brilliant. You consult your students. You know, they're the ones who know, and they're a different animal to my generation, and the generation perhaps after me. Because one of the things that's happened at AUT, I've been at AUT for 17 years, I have never been misgendered by a student. You know,
wow.
Kids will say to each other, oh, who's your lecturer? What's that person's name again? Oh, that's Lexi. And they will come in with a pronoun pretty well straight away. Oh, she's fabulous, or she's a pain in the ass, or whatever it might happen to be. But I've never been misgendered by staff quite often, and occasionally on purpose, which is what really, really hurts. But that's great. For quite a few years, I have been a person that the education department goes to go and sort out problems about toilets in schools. And this first started about 6 or 7 years ago at Marlborough Girls College, when Marlborough Girls College accepted a transgender student for the first time. And this young woman had shifted from Marlborough Boys College to the Girls College, and there were lots of questions asked about toilets and so on. And one of the questions was, what toilet will she use? And the staff, in their wisdom, said they didn't ask the students. I know what they'd have got as an answer if they'd asked the students. They decided that there would be a unisex toilet specifically for this young woman. And she said, no, I want to be able to use the same toilets as the other girls. And with the one exception, which had a religious undertone to it, the other girls went, yeah, of course, she can, she's just a girl like us. So so I went there for 3 days to solve a problem which wasn't actually a problem. It's the result was exactly as you're saying, Amanda. The students decided, they just went, yes, not a problem. What's the issue here? So I got nicely paid by the education department to make some new friends and walk away with the credit. I got the credit for it, whereas in fact I did nothing. I solved one little problem, but that was very minor.
That's awesome. Perhaps one of the things is a couple of definitions. I know that there's quite a bit of confusion out there. People are probably hearing the term, cisgender, transgender. What would be could you just explain that? I think that would help people as well.
Yeah, it's a term that's we've started to use in recent times, probably the last 5 years. Transgender means the opposite gender to which you were identified when you were born. And cisgender means the opposite. So if you were identified as a girl child when you were born and you've lived your life as a girl child, basically it means not transgender. So cisgender is somebody who's living an authentic life that goes back to their birth, whereas in my case, I was identified as a male child, and now I'm, a transgender adult. So that's a term that, and sometimes we just use the term cis, and sometimes we use the term cishet, which is short for cisgender heterosexual, or in other words, the enemy. No, not at all. But these are terms, and if you have a look through the list that I've put there, there's about 5 pages of different definitions, and many of them you won't have come across before, and there's no sense of if there's anything wrong if you haven't come across these words before. Eve, you have a question.
Yes, Eve, please unmute yourself. Hello.
Kia ora. Well, thank you very much, Lexi. I'm fortunate enough to be online today with one of my colleagues who actually put me in touch with this session. And one of the questions we've been discussing, sort of chatting in the background, and I was wondering, have you felt a difference sort of pre and post transitioning around how you were treated in the workplace in terms of being treated, because we know that men and women are treated differently in the workplace, and did you feel that firsthand?
Yes, not while it was happening initially. I just lived my life and people listened to me, and I was reasonably popular, and I got on with it. But once I transitioned, there was, and it's an interesting one, this one, there was a conscious effort on behalf of a lot of people to treat me well. And that's nice, but that was based around a whole lot of stereotypes as well. How do we treat women? Well, this is how we treat women. We open doors for them. Okay, I use that as a stereotype, but there were other things as well that were not quite so obvious. It's interesting. I think in the last 5 years, things have got a lot worse in terms of hate speech and so on in the workplace. A lot of my colleagues who identify as LGBT, the university supports us, but it's not as comfortable as it's been in the past. For example, we've got a lot of redundancies coming up, 230 redundancies coming up. And when I talk to my colleagues, they all think, well, are we going to be first to go? We still have that thing of, well, we're different. Are we going to get got rid of because we're the ones who are different? In my case, it'll be they're going to get rid of me because I never shut up. That I advocate constantly. I'm not going to change that at my age, but it's a concern we have. And I think in terms of safety in the community, that's a big one now. That people won't do things that they would have done 5 years ago for the simple reason they don't feel physically safe. That's not answering your question. But yeah, it is different now. In my school, it's okay. I've got people, I've been there for 17 years. There are people there who've been there longer than me who've never spoken to me. And it's not because I'm an awful person or anything. They just don't know how to relate to someone who's different. And when I talk to my Māori colleagues, they say the same. That how do we actually bridge that gap between a group of nice people and another group of nice people? How do we draw them together so that we've got a big group of nice people talking to each other? And that's what today's about, really. But that's a really good question, Eve, a really good question. And next time, tell your colleague to ask it herself. Thank you. Is that sort of an answer?
Yes, absolutely. No, that's very, very helpful. And we were sort of also wondering, does the difference come from is the perception heightened because you are used to being treated as a man and in the workplace, and then when you see the contrast, are you all the more aware of the contrast because it's new and different versus somebody who has experienced being a woman in the workplace for their whole career? There's so many different ways of looking at it from a research perspective as well.
Absolutely, yes, there is. I think in terms of unpacking that, as you asked the question, when I talk to my partner, who's younger than I am, and from a different generation, she's used to the way she's treated. I'm not used to that. So there's a part of me that rebels against it in ways that cisgender women often don't. How do we accept our lot? This is what's always happened, so this is what we always do. And sport is one of the areas where that's profoundly obvious. This is what we've always done, so this is what we always do. And how do we bring about change in that space without destroying anybody or without diminishing anybody's sense of who they are? one of the things that concerns me, and I don't hear a lot of people sort of talking about it, is that we're pretty down on men these days. You know, there's men are responsible for everything. Oh yes, and you know, of course, he's just a bloke. What does that mean? What are we saying to our young men when we blame them for, you know, pretty well everything that's around? And we've got to find an equity in there that enables us to all be on the same page and be able to respect each other. Now, I don't expect everyone to respect me because I'm me. And some people will like me and some people won't, and that's not changed. That what's changed is the people who don't like me or can't have anything to do with me because of what I am rather than who I am. And if we can get around that block, I think there was a lot of challenges in the employment space around that. You know, if you've got somebody sitting in front of you who's that different, part of you is going to be thinking, well, this is the best applicant, but how am I going to deal with that? And it's my business, so I've got to be cautious about myself as well. So somehow or other, we've got to empower people to make decisions that are empowering about their businesses and empowering about the people who will be employed. And sometimes that means making some hard decisions about how we talk to people. But when we talk to people, we must always talk with respect. We must always talk with respect.
Right, well, look, thank you, Lexi, that's been phenomenal. And thank you for being the one trans person to stand up for all trans people. I think that's a really difficult position to be in because,
yes,
you know, it sort of means that you're the only spokesperson, and that is a difficult one. It's a little bit like, I think, for some people of colour being the only person of colour, and suddenly they become the person that we always go to. So I really do appreciate the fact that you have had an enormous amount of shared experience in this space, and that you have the ability to share it as well with others. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us. We will provide you with the recording of this and also with Lexi's slides. There is an enormous amount of information that she has not been able to cover, but hey, I think we've actually had an enormous amount of information now. What I really do hope is that people understand that we're just people and we need to approach each other on that basis of understanding and how we're going to actually find a way through and be comfortable with each other. So thank you again for your time. Appreciate we'll probably run a little bit over schedule today, but that's okay because Lexi always talks an awful lot, but that's cool. We've really enjoyed it. And Lexi, you have got a very challenging next 3 days at an anti-terrorism conference, which sounds fascinating, and will be really interesting to catch up with you after that, actually. I'd really like to know how that goes. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us. We are planning now for our Keystone Talks 2023, and we're looking at what that thematic will be. We're probably going to be tying it into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is pretty much where we stand, and we reflect back to Goal 4, which is around education for all, and we'll be looking at how we can bring that through into some of the conversations that we have next year. So thank you again for joining us. Please, this recording and the other recordings are all on our YouTube channel. Go there and find them. You're very welcome to. And if you've got any questions, as Lexi has said, fire them through. We can either pass them on for you, or you will, through this recording, have Lexi's contact details. So have a really great evening, everyone. Thank you, Lexi. You put an inordinate amount of time into this. Kia ora, and have a really great evening, everyone.
Kia ora, bye-bye. Take care.